Hey everyone, Tony D and Little Joan here. I guess you'd call this a hot take, although it's kind of a piney podcast because it's about Philly, which is just across the river. So, this is from September 9th. Mayor Kenney calls encampment resistance disappointing and unacceptable. As eviction deadline meets opposition, city will continue to assess options. Now, I think this has actually gotten worse since this article. There's a homeless encampment, and the resistance, the Antifa BLM movement, they're in on it, and you can tell by their sign, "Housing Now." Free housing is, or guaranteed housing is, a platform of communist, and it's one that people are, they're at least, yeah, maybe we should give people, a place to live and sleep or whatever. And I understand that. The problem is, of course, these are the same sorts of people who would protest at anti-war rallies. They are completely unreasonable. They don't just protest housing, and they don't attempt to really push forth the legal maneuvers. And when you get right down to it, when you're pushing just housing, it's kind of a boring subject. So it's very hard. It's very hard to get the public, enraged about the lack of housing, unless you have swaths of thousands and thousands of people who are homeless. Which does Philly? I don't know what the numbers are. I assume they're a little higher because of everything that's happened in recent months. But it's at least to Mayor Kenney's credit, another Democrat, that he's evicting these people at all. Because, you don't want to get a situation like in Portland. This is why on the East Coast we haven't had as many problems, at least, other than New York, which is run by a communist lunatic named Bill de Blasio. But Kenney is, he's a little more reasonable, at least. As of this is according to the Philly Voice. As of 9 a.m. deadline approach, protesters at the Parkway encampment set up barricades and chanted for housing. Leaders at the Parkway site said they would not leave, and if forced to leave, they would return. And someone covering this tweeted, who is she? This is Anna Orzo. I assume she's a reporter. She's got a blue check mark. A group of about half dozen clergy showed up while encampment organizers held a press conference. Jamal Henderson of ACT UP says to them, "Where have you been?" This is the sort of attitude that's, aroused recently, because it's like, now it's way more confrontational than it used to be. It used to be hippies doing this, and they would be relatively calm. Yeah, they do some some guilt tripping, if you will. And these guys are like, "We're not gonna go, and if the encampment is dismantled, we'll rebuild it." Okay, I mean, as long as it's peaceful, I'm fine with that. I don't like you blocking roads. I think that's dangerous. As long as you're willing to be arrested and go with the police, and if you want to keep doing that, that's your time, and I'm okay with that. I don't want you guys to turn into, don't allow your ranks to be infiltrated by Antifa. Do not allow that, because they will make trouble. And I would imagine that you see a piece of fence here in this picture. Let's see if we can play this without blasting my ears out. Here, I'll keep the sound. So you can see they got a video going on. They got a bit of a fence thing here. Okay, you put up the fence, but if the cops come to take it down, don't fight them. Don't fight with the cops. According to the article, the mayor criticized encampment leaders for cursing at clergy members who were sent to provide assistance. Yeah, that's not cool. There's no reason to do that. They're on your side. Outreach workers barred from entering had hoped to offer homeless residents counseling service, shelter, recovering housing, behavioral health placements, and registration for rapid rehousing. Um, why wouldn't you allow that? That's a win. I'll tell you why. Because, if they manage to pick off, I don't know, say 100 of the homeless and get them into some sort of counseling or temporary shelters, the encampment will start to die. Um, you can't provide permanent housing for everyone. You just can't. When it comes to homeless people, once you've been living on the street, it's hard to transition back. It's really hard. And not all the homeless people will be willing to even do that. Look at what happened in New York. De Blasio put the homeless in these fancy hotels. I mean, they're beautiful hotels. They're totally free to them. And what are they doing? They're wrecking them. And they're sleeping on the street anyway. They're peeing all over the floor and then leaving. What's the point? What is the point? They had a place to live and they ruined it. Why? It's because some of them, I think, are mentally ill. Some of them are drug addicts, and more often than not, some people, not all people, not all homeless, but some live a life of self-destruction, and they need help. They need serious psychiatric help that they're probably never going to get. Unless that's an angle we really could work on. I've always said, a libertarian solution would be to make, being a counselor and a psychiatrist extremely lucrative with huge tax breaks. And one of the tax breaks could be for every one of, say, these homeless peoples you take in and counsel, you get an enormous tax break, and just provide insane tax breaks for this kind of work, and people will do it. They'll do it because there'll be money in it. And, let them solve the problem. And then, if under a libertarian system we wouldn't have such high taxes, but, you could provide other things, other incentives, I suppose. But, we have such high taxes, especially in this area. That would be a no-brainer. If you provided, it's so expensive to live in the city of Philadelphia, right? You pay a city wage tax. If you provided, okay, if you take in even one of these homeless people and treat them, no city wage tax. And then, you could just click it on down for every homeless people you take in and treat, you get a benefit. You couldn't just have one session. You'd have to actually treat them for, like, say, a year. And at the end of the year, you'd get the tax break, or, have to be the majority of the year, say 9 months. And you couldn't just cut them off. You'd have to write out the rules, and I'm sure there would be some people who would take advantage or lie or whatever. But a lot of them wouldn't. I mean, the people who get into mental health are just like doctors. They want to help people. So, this kind of, well, we got to get people in the homes and that'll solve our problem if we just had a government program. No. No. How did the projects work out in Philadelphia? They were awful. They weren't free, but, when you give somebody something, they don't value it as much. They don't consider it theirs. They're not invested in it. And so they treat it like, a kid that you give a toy to every week. You give a kid a toy every week. Guess what? He's not going to put his toys away. He's not even going to treat the toys well. He's going to break them because he's getting another toy next week. It's the same sort of mentality. That's human beings. You have to have an investment in your own home. And again, there are just people, they're too messed up. They'll never go back. You'd literally have to put them in jail. And that's where a lot of people end up. So, there are a lot of do-gooders out there, and they mean well, and some of them are caught up in the latest revolution, but they haven't really drilled down. Because, hey, nothing's stopping you, protesters, if you have an apartment, from taking in a homeless guy and saying, okay, live with me in my apartment. You could be my roommate. It's rent-free. I pay the rent. Just, yeah, how would that work out? You know how it would work out. The homeless guy might rob you. He might end up taking drugs there. He'd wreck your place and sell your stuff, and it would be a nightmare. It'd be a nightmare, and you know it. So stop dumping this on the government like they have the solution. They don't. They're terrible at what they do. The last thing I want the government to do is to decide where anyone lives, especially the most vulnerable people, because they'll be terrible at it. They'll pick the cheapest, dumbest place, and homeless people will probably be worse off. Yeah, they'll probably be worse off. You know, where are you better off? Sleeping in a park, on a nice park bench, or say sleeping in a rat-infested tenement? I mean, it's a tough call. You know, the tenement might be worse if there's enough rats in it. And the city of Philadelphia just has so many abandoned buildings, so many old buildings. They're collapsing, and you know, it's a shame. But I got to give credit to Governor Kenney. I mean, at least he's not entertaining these dummies and letting them stay there. He's actually drawing some lines. And I've always said, what do the Democrats need? They need limits. This is Mayor Kenney drawing the line, saying the resistance is disappointing and unacceptable. Now, I'm willing to meet you part way, but, you know, at some point I have to say no. Good for you, Mayor.